Perched strategically atop a 357-foot sandstone mesa for defensive purposes, Acoma Pueblo is more commonly recognized as Sky City today. It is believed to be the longest continuously inhabited city in the United States, with origins dating back to sometime between 1100 and 1250 AD. The name Acoma finds its roots in the Puebloan Quersan dialect, meaning people of the White Rock. Spanning about 70 acres, the pueblo is actually a conglomerate of various villages, including Acomita, McCarty's, Anzac, and Skyline. The choice of this location was influenced in part by its ability to serve as a defensible position against potential raiders. Access to the pueblo was challenging due to the sheer faces of the mesa. In times before modern conveniences, entry was possible only through a hand-cut staircase laboriously carved into the sandstone. For countless centuries, the Acoma people have been engaged in agriculture in the valley below Acoma Pueblo, utilizing irrigation canals in the villages nearer to the Rio San Jose River. They were also actively involved in trade with neighboring pueblos and engaged in long-distance trade with the Aztec and Mayan civilizations. Acoma Pueblo had already established its presence when the first European, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, laid eyes on it in 1540. He described it as follows: "One of the strongest ever seen because the city was built on a high rock. The ascent was so difficult that we repented climbing to the top. Due to its challenging accessibility, Acoma proved to be one of the most resistant pueblos to Spanish rule. During the early encounters with the Spanish, reports indicated that the Acoma people were amicable, often meeting expedition parties at the base of the mesa to extend greetings and offer assistance. However, as Spanish presence became more persistent, tensions escalated. In 1598, Governor Juan de Oñate, acting on orders from the King of Spain, invaded New Mexico and initiated raids on Native American pueblos in the region, seizing anything of value. The Spanish soldiers established their headquarters at Ocay Owingue Pueblo, formerly known as San Juan Pueblo, situated approximately 25 miles north of Santa Fe. Upon their arrival, they displaced the Tewa tribe that lived there and used it as a base for launching further raids on neighboring Native American pueblos. In December 1598, a group of Spanish soldiers arrived at Acoma in search of food. Initially, they were greeted warmly and treated with hospitality. However, their demeanor shifted as they turned aggressive, demanding grain from the Acoma storehouses that was vital for the tribe's survival during the winter. This provocation triggered a furious response from the Acoma, leading to an attack on the soldiers. 13 of the soldiers, including their commander Juan de Zaldivar, a nephew of Juan de Oñate, lost their lives in the confrontation. In retaliation, Oñate decided to make an example of Acoma and sent 70 of his most skilled men, led by Vicente de Zaldivar, to launch an attack on Acoma Pueblo. On January 21, 1599, the Spanish forces came within sight of the pueblo, prompting the Acoma tribe to spread out from their village to defend the mesa's edge. As the Spaniards approached, the defenders rained down a barrage of rocks and arrows upon them. Despite the defensive onslaught from atop the mesa, the soldiers gradually fought their way to the summit over the following 3 days. During the battle, the Spaniards managed to transport a small cannon up the back of the mesa and began bombarding the village. The conflict eventually turned into a massacre, resulting in the death of as many as 800 Acoma people, and the pueblo lay in ruins. Following the battle, the survivors were marched to Santo Domingo Pueblo, now known as the Quewa Pueblo, where all males aged 12 and older were sentenced to 20 years of servitude. Among the few dozen Acoma men of fighting age who remained after the battle, some had one of their feet amputated as part of their punishment. The surviving children under the age of 12 were separated from their parents and entrusted to Spanish missionaries for upbringing. However, the majority of these children, as well as the women, were sold into slavery. Oñate faced a trial, during which he was convicted of cruelty to both Indians and colonists. He was subsequently banished from New Mexico. However, Oñate appealed the verdict and was ultimately acquitted of all charges. He spent the remainder of his life in Spain. Ultimately, the Acoma Pueblo, once inhabited by around 2,000 people, saw its population reduced to approximately 250 survivors after the conflict. Over time, some Acoma people managed to escape and return home, where they embarked on the lengthy process of reconstruction. Since then, the pueblo has remained continuously inhabited and never again fell to an invader. In the 1620s, as a peaceful gesture aimed at converting the Indians to Christianity, the Spanish initiated the construction of the San Esteban del Rey mission. This mission included a church, convent, and cemetery. Every building material, which amounted to about 20,000 tons of earth and stone, was manually carried or transported up the steep slopes of the mesa. The mission's substantial 30-foot beams were hauled from Mount Taylor and Coestama, situated about 30 miles away. Under the guidance of Friar Juan Ramirez, the church's construction was finally completed in 1640. However, according to Acoma oral tradition, the people were compelled by Ramirez to construct the mission. The primary facade of the church was flanked by two square bell towers that housed bells imported from Mexico during the 1800s. Adjacent to the church's north side, there was a one-story convento that once served as living quarters, workshops, and storage for the father and friars residing there. The immense church still stands today and remains an impressive piece of architecture. During the 1600s, tensions persisted between the Spanish colonists and native peoples across the Southwest. Much of the conflict revolved around religious differences. The abuses of authority by both religious and political figures ultimately led to the Pueblo Revolt. On August 10, 1680, approximately 17,000 Puebloans, including 6,000 warriors, rose in retaliation against 3,000 colonists. These tribes attacked mission churches, resulting in the deaths of 22 out of 33 friars, as well as the destruction and burning of many churches. Warriors targeted isolated farms and haciendas, leading to the deaths of entire families. The Acoma people took part in the revolt by killing the Spanish friars living on the mesa at the time, but refrained from damaging the church. It stood as one of the few Spanish missions to emerge from the revolt unscathed. Ultimately, the Spanish were driven out of New Mexico.